Not only that, he emphasized the aesthetic superiority of Sanskrit to Latin and Greek. I quote, "The Sanskrit language is of a wonderful structure, more perfect than Greek, more copious than Latin, and more exquisitely refined than either." More refined than ancient Greek. Here was a revolution indeed, and it soon eventuated in a deadly mitosis at the heart of philology. Philologists studied ancient literary texts. Their holy grail was to produce a more perfect edition of Homer. In order to do so, as we saw in the discipline's origins, philologists necessarily studied the languages of those ancient texts. And this is very important. Language and literature were for them a unified subject. But in the aftermath of the European discovery of Sanskrit, linguistics, Sprachwissenschaft, a new independent science rapidly formed, which split off very quickly into the study of living languages. And it's not very long after that when scholars in the various European states began to study the past of their own vernacular traditions. They now read not Homer, but the Chanson de Roland or the Nibelungenlied. And patriotic scholars who felt they lacked their own national epics created them out of existing fragments, Lönnroth's Kalevala, or like Macpherson and his Ossian, they simply invented them. By the way, the Czechs in the 1880s are particularly ingenious at inventing these phony epics. It is out of the nationalistic wreckage of classical philology, then, that our current departments of foreign languages and literature are born. I hasten over these developments because they are well known and because I wish to examine another revolution that is arguably more significant at the present time than any other I've sketched for grasping what the future of our discipline might be. I have in mind, no doubt predictably, the welter of events that have been swept under the conceptual rug of the digital revolution. I do so not to rehearse again for the umpteenth time arguments for or against the impact that new technologies are having on reading skills. What that impact will be, or even what it is still not very well understood for all the punditry that it has evoked. I wish rather to suggest that at a deeper level, what is now going on is a new reenactment of a very old battle. The never-finished struggle between mathematical knowledge and humanist knowledge. What we have never quite managed to understand is what the Nobel Prize winner Eugene Wigner, a physicist, called the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. He was remarking once again the bafflement felt by sages over the millennia as they confronted the primordial difference between the godlike order of mathematics and on the one hand and on the other the unpredictable chaos that inheres in human existence. Numbers dazzle us because of their abstraction. In itself, mathematics is neither political nor historical. Its unreasonable effectiveness, what from a human perspective might be called the paradox of our numeracy, stems precisely from its inhumanity, its timeless distance from the vagaries of lived life as mortals who are condemned to history experience. A melodramatic illustration of the difference between numbers and humans is the Roman army's institution of decimation. You'll remember that a unit to be published would be lined up, counted off, and the 10th man in each file would be clubbed to death by the other 9 soldiers in the line. Now, under different circumstances, 10 for the soldier who was clubbed to death would still have been 10, even if he used it to keep score in a game he played as a child. As a numerical sign, 10 remains 10 for legionnaires as men and legionaries as children, despite the enormous difference between the numbers' meaning in each case. The obvious point being that if mathematics is to be used as a tool by creatures that come and go in time, the historyless abstraction of numbers must somehow be domesticated for human use in any existential appropriation of their awful precision. Digitization has its roots in the stochastic revolution of the 17th century. By applying statistical calculation to human decision-making, thinkers such as Pascal, Fermat, and Leibniz discovered a way to harness the awful majesty of mathematics for human use in decision-making. The void between the omniscience of religion's all-seeing God and the blind ignorance of mere mortals was bridged as informed risk intervened where blind chance had previously reigned. As Ian Hacking has put it, chance passed from what Hume had called the superstition of the vulgar to become the foundation of the physical world and the cement of the social universe. After the Second World War, the ability to integrate mathematics into decision-making enjoyed a second revolution as new techniques for harnessing statistics to ever-expanding technologies came online. From our deadliest weapons to the rainbow-colored Monte Carlo projections of our retirement funds, what is often called Monte Carlo projections are actually, they derive from the work of a wonderful Russian mathematician named Markov. But that's another story. At any rate, reconceived in a Bayesian dimension, they have found subtle new ways to interpenetrate our lives as we become more and more dependent on spell check, search engines, and the extraordinary ability to recover formerly lost continents from our past. Mass digitization has enlarged exponentially our access to oceans of potentially data mineable manuscripts, for instance. These are changes not only in how we might conceive texts, they are transformations in the nature of what constitutes literacy itself. As we say on the Lower East Side in New York, so what's not to like? You may recall, I mentioned, that when our new science of reading neglects at any rate, is the question of what happens when words from a text get into not only our brains, but our minds. What I'm suggesting is that we are in the midst of a crisis about how words mean. Does language work because it is ruled by statistics, as information theory and computational linguistics argue, or does it work because of what we used to call semantics? That is, meanings that attach to words independent of their frequency. The digital revolution may be said then to have two sources, both ominously enough related to war. The first is the Allied breaking of the German Enigma code during World War II. The second is John von Neumann's use of Turing's theoretical model to build an actual machine, the MANIAC computer at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton. Von Neumann did so. I mean, the reason why he was so concerned to develop this computer was because as a refugee from Nazism and communism later on, he was a Cold Warrior to the nth degree.